Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Baumgarten, but I expect you already know that. And I welcome you to this discussion on Facebook Live, on paltalk.com, and on YouTube. Some of you may be old enough, I certainly am, maybe a lot of you aren't, to remember the old movie, The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming. Well, the Russians are here, and they are here not physically running over our countries, but they are here virtually running over us on social media. Just today, for example, British intelligence has told us that the Russians have hacked in to the databases in the West on the coronavirus. Now, why the various countries aren't just sharing that information is a secondary topic, so that they wouldn't have to hack. But the reality is, and we know from the last election, that the Russians, the Chinese, others have been trying to disrupt our electoral process on social media with disinformation. But did you know that some of the times when you're arguing with somebody on social media, you could be arguing with a bot? Absolutely true, according to the research. And the woman who is responsible for that research is Gianna Matthews, a professor at Clarkson University in upstate New York. Professor Matthews, welcome to the discussion.
Hi, Gary. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Now, you're a real person, right? I'm not talking to a robot here.
I am a 100% real person.
That's good to know. Tell me what motivated you to do the research, and what did you learn?
Well, I'm just generally a computer security person, and I started to see more and more signs of attacks on social media. Early on, social media had much more of an organic human signal to it, and I saw it become more and more dominated by, algorithmically controlled bots controlled from elsewhere, and it's been really discouraging to me to watch the effect of that on our civil discourse and on our electoral process.
If you stop to think about it, in case people have a hard time understanding this, the comparison that I would like to make, and you could tell me whether I'm right or wrong about this, and that's fine if I'm wrong, correct me. But a lot of times when you're dealing with customer service on the telephone, you're talking to an artificial intelligence program. They ask you a question, you answer the question, they respond to that question. Is that pretty much how it works when you're having a discussion with quote unquote someone on Facebook, for example?
I mean, it could be like that, but oftentimes you wouldn't have to have any kind of direct interaction with a bot to be incredibly impacted by them. That's interesting, right? You wouldn't have to ever have said hello or argued with them back and forth. It can simply be that by their liking certain posts in mass, it affects what you see, what you're fed in your news feed in social media. And not only does it affect what you see, it affects what your friends and neighbors see. And then it affects their opinions. So you're affected in a lot of ways, even if you never try to argue with one.
So basically, they are controlling or interfering with the algorithm that the social media companies have put into place.
Yeah, very much so. One, they author information and stick it out there, and then they use armies of bots to vote that they like it, and that amplifies the chances that it'll get shown to real people. And then they'll get affected by that information.
Now, in your research, are they trying to push a specific agenda or a specific candidate or candidates, or are they just trying to get us to fight one another and have a virtual civil war in the United States and in other countries?
There's a mix of agendas. Certainly one of the agendas is divide and conquer. So they will introduce extreme views on both sides of issues, with the express goal of pulling the middle apart. So maybe they don't really care one side or the other, vaccines or not, or whatever. They don't care. They just want people to be fighting. Another agenda they have is to get you to question people in authority, question the CDC, question scientists, question, people who might have facts on a matter. So introduce chaos.
Question the news media. Question the news media.
True. Also, if you think about it, if you wanted to destroy a snake, what would you do? Like chop it up into little pieces would be good. Divide and conquer. Even just chopping off the head would be a good strategy. It even gets to the point of really just getting people to question whether there's any truth at all. They'll just introduce all sorts of lies and misinformation, so you start to question, is it even possible to determine what's facts or not? I mean, I think if we stop a moment and ask ourselves, we know there are facts that matter. There are things that happen. There are things that people said or did at given dates and times, and many times it's possible to determine those facts. But they introduce so much mud into the water that people question what they think they know. And you asked if they had any agendas that they do push. Some, yes. They clearly favored one candidate over the other in the 2016 election. And they clearly favor reopening the economy without sufficient protections. So you could ask yourself how those two stances might be in the interest of Russian bots, but not in the interest of you and your family. But those are two ones where they don't pick both sides. They pretty much stick to one side of those issues.
So we've become unwitting tools of the Russian government when we pick up on some of the argumentation and then re-amplify it in our own postings.
Yeah. It's really sad. If you weren't successful destroying a country from outside, maybe you can get people to destroy it from inside all by themselves. That's pretty sad.
Well, it seems by the evidence in front of us, clearly in front of us, that the effort is successful. We have marriages that break up over arguments on politics, and we have friendships that break up over arguments on politics, and the discourse is far from civil in many cases. On my timeline, for example, I have kicked people off not for the positions that they are taking, but because they're not treating one another in a civil manner. My position has always been, if you disagree with me, disagree with me. I can still be your friend. I don't care if you like chocolate milk and I like white milk. So we have a difference of opinion. I know that's simplifying it. And I would just think that if we all took that attitude, things would be better. So I want to ask you, Clarkson University professor Gianna Matthews, what is it that we can do to recognize this and protect ourselves from being sucked in?
So my bottom line message would be to use social media a little bit like any other addictive substance. It's one thing maybe to have a drink with dinner. It's another thing to overconsume. And social media is designed to be addictive. It's designed to have little things that pop up all the time and kind of suck you back in your attention. I would encourage people to use social media deliberately and specifically. So instead of just going to social media and just consuming everything off of the default feed, whatever you're fed, maybe have your own agenda. Here's an experiment. I think most people, if they try it, find it enlightening. Pick a few friends on social media that you think you follow really well and you've seen all their posts, and go to their pages and see directly what they have there. I bet you find a bunch of things you didn't even know they posted.
I do that when people try to friend me because I'm a semi-public person. I get a lot of people trying to friend me on Facebook. It's to the point where I don't know who they are or what associations they have with other people who are my Facebook friends. The term friends is a bit of a misnomer. I think it was a great marketing tool on the part of Mark Zuckerberg to call them not contacts, but friends. But I do that. I'll click on somebody's profile and I'll see, okay, there's one picture and nothing else. Or they're engaging with their friends, their family. They have points of view. They have a profile that suggests that they have a job or they're going to school. And that helps me vet out the individuals who I decide to accept as friends. And I guess the same could be said for when somebody is maybe an outlier in their positions, whether it's to the left or to the right. Maybe it's a good idea to click on their profile and try to judge, use a little common sense. Who are you really talking to here?
Yeah. So not accepting people into your contact list if you don't know them personally could be, a strategy worth considering. And I would also really encourage people to pressure the social media platforms to do a better job of policing signs of algorithmic accounts, bots. It's a game. It is a game. If they take out this round, they'll get better and better and better. But it's a game they're not even playing. They're leaving the most obvious signs of algorithmic control just undisturbed. You can have 1,000 accounts that all have the exact same profile picture that all like in unison, and they won't. They don't always remove those things. They let misinformation that is so clearly misinformation just run rampant. They wouldn't even have to get into the subtle cases to do a better job than they're doing now. Then of course the subtle cases are trickier, and we could talk about that, but you could pressure them to be doing some of the common sense things that they could be doing and they're not.
It's interesting you should say that, because that was my next question. You kind of anticipated. What can the social media companies do? And I think there's a fine line between trying to stop this kind of attack on their programs and trying to control what people say and think and post. And we know that many conservatives feel that some of these platforms are putting them into like Facebook jail because somebody or some algorithm doesn't like their point of view. And I myself have been captured. One of the things that both Facebook and YouTube are doing now, and I understand why they are doing it, is they don't want disinformation being promulgated about the COVID-19, because that disinformation can actually determine whether a person's health is put at risk. Well, I interviewed a physician who talked about a treatment that he's a professor, by the way, of emergency medicine at the University of Texas. So, I mean, this is a person with credentials, and he talked about a medication that they have been trying out on patients that has proven remarkably effective. And whether their algorithm thought that this was some nonsense fighting the science, or whether somebody complained about it, which it could 50-50, could have been one or the other. They took it down without even contacting me first, asking for an explanation. I don't think that's what we want them to do. But I imagine that if the Russians and others have an algorithm that they can use that can blast likes and blast the same profile over and over again, Facebook and YouTube and the others, Twitter, ought to have some kind of an algorithm that could detect that. So
you asked a really good question about this and the relationship to freedom of speech, and I see someone in the chat asking that as well. And I'm a big freedom of speech advocate as well, but I want you to ask this question. So I think you should have freedom of speech with your one mouth and body. Take that mouth and body wherever you want and say with it what you want. But because I have freedom of speech, does that mean I have a right to 100,000 bots to amplify my opinion? Do I have a right to create both my opinion and a fake account on the opposite side of the opinion that I may look ridiculous and extreme so that I drive people away from the opposite point? Do I have the right to create a ton of accounts just for the purpose of seeding chaos? Do I get to be a million bodies? Do I just get my one mouth and body for freedom of speech? I think that's a really good question, and it's not a question we are answering well. Some people put it as speech, not reach. You don't necessarily have the right to amplification of your speech. And I think people get that confused.
Well, this is a terrific interview, because I believe that right now, based on our discussion, we are moving forward our thought process on how to deal with this, because up until now, it's been kind of a knee-jerk reaction the members of Congress and Zuckerberg and the others sit there and well, Senator, yes, we'll do a better job. We haven't done but they haven't really addressed the specific issue. And is there a way that we can maybe pressure our representatives in Congress? Is there data that we can forward to their staffs that they ought to be looking at that supports your argument that there are automated systems in place that are influencing the thought process in the United States and wreaking havoc and discord?
I mean, they could just start by reading the Mueller report, honestly. A lot of that is about, the IRA manipulation in the election. There's a lot of facts out there right now that a lot of elected representatives just don't want to look at. So you could start by asking your representatives to follow the facts and also follow the law. You see a lot in the news right now where the law doesn't apply to some people. If it says no endorsing of products, period. Is that a law we got to follow? Oh, no, we only have to follow the laws we like. That's going to lead us down the road to dictatorship and fast.
I think you're right. I think our basic freedoms are really at risk. Yeah, I think our basic freedoms, Professor Gianna Matthews from Clarkson University, I think our basic freedoms are at risk here. I don't know that people in the heat of the battle, I hate you because you're a Republican, that's nonsense what you're saying. I hate you because you're a Democrat, that's nonsense what you're saying. We're so involved in the skirmish that we don't step back to see what the real war is really about.
And when we can't even manage to make fundamental public health a non-political issue, who are we? If we're going to basic. I don't know. It's we have to look at facts. We have to care about facts again and not just who said them or who it's going to help.
Yeah. Well, one of our challenges that we have in our business is that people distrust the news media and that's a propagandizing campaign that causes people to distrust the news media. Yeah. It's really interesting. Sometimes I will post a link to Fox, for example, and people will say, well, that's fake news. I don't trust Fox. And so then I will post a link to the New York Times, CNN, MSNBC that says the same thing that Fox said. Or I'll post a link from the Washington Post. Well, I wouldn't believe anything that the Washington Post says. They just dismiss it out of hand. And then I'll post an article that matches it from the Washington Times, for example, or even Breitbart, if you really want to go to an extreme. We have conditioned ourselves to be distrustful prima facie on things that are happening. We distrust our teachers. We distrust the education process. We distrust the news media. We distrust the politicians. We know that all cops are either draw a line and fill in the blank that expresses your emotion or my emotion with regard to the police. And clearly, whatever somebody fills in, especially when the word all is included, it's going to be wrong because all you need is one exception to prove the assertion wrong. And we're not clear thinkers any longer, Professor. As a society, maybe some of us are individuals.
It goes a little bit back. It goes a little bit back to what we were saying about one of the agendas of the bots is to make you distrust any source of leadership. If you wanted to kill a snake, cutting the head off would be a good way to go. So and anyone who can serve as a voice of direction, a leader, and an establisher of facts. If you think each one of us has to be a scientist and an investigative journalist and a doctor and everything, we have to firsthand verify every single thing for ourselves because we don't trust anyone, that is incredibly inefficient. We can't have a functional society that way. It's one thing to hold people to journalistic ethics. Say, look, you wrote this article and you didn't have the facts to back it up, and you should be censored or whatever, or you should have to apologize. You have to put that in, like, that's, but to basically say, I don't trust the news media. How in the world are you going to have any worldview beyond what you experience in your own, head and family and community? People who are journalists and doctors and scientists and researchers and educators, they need to follow their professional ethics, and we need to hold them accountable when they don't. Just like when we have congressmen or other elected officials, they should do their job, or we should hold them accountable when they don't. And we're not doing too well at that right now.
And by the way, social media has actually reduced our engagement with our elected officials, in my opinion, because we think that we could be social justice warriors and just get on our timelines and complain about this congressman. That doesn't do it. You have to pick up the phone and call the congressman's office or congresswoman's office, or write a letter, or if you're too lazy to do that, email, which I don't think is as effective, and show up at the town halls and vote. And people discount the voting so much. What they don't realize is so few people vote that every single vote in their minds, not from our perspective, from their perspective, every single vote counts. That's why constituent services is the most important position in a member of Congress's office. If you call and complain that you're not getting service and it can just be local service, they're going to step in and call your local government and get that resolved for you, so that you can tell all your friends and neighbors that Congressman or Congresswoman so-and-so took care of the pothole in front of my house because the mayor wouldn't do it. And now, well, he's a good guy, she's a good gal, they're going to get my vote. So they are very much aware that the vote is extremely important. And when we say, it doesn't matter, we're really heading down a bad rabbit's hole, I think.
I think that would be a good place to start right there, is voting and pushing back on unfair voting practices. Closing tons of polling places in one area and not another, severely gerrymandered districts. That's not cool. That's not cool.
Well, here's where social media does help, because we get the word out.
Yeah.
Social media does help in this.
Get back to, standing up for what is right. Fair is fair. Facts are facts. The law is the law. Not just it's the law for the people I don't agree with, but it's okay when they're on my side. And I'll stand up for the votes I want, but not for the votes I don't. Or, facts are okay when they support my view, but not when they don't. All of those things are possible to know. What is the law? What are the facts? And
well, we're counting on you and your colleagues, no matter what area of instruction they're giving, to include a mandate to your students to be critical thinkers. If we can learn to be critical thinkers and not just accept positions that we are already predisposed to agree with, maybe we can produce a generation that cleans out the slate a little bit for the mess that my generation has left society.
We're certainly in a turning point, it seems right now, an inflection point, and let's all hope that it goes in a better direction.
Yeah. Well, let's use social media for good, not for bad, and let's be aware of what's going on with these Russian bots. Clarkson University professor Gianna Matthews, thanks for taking this time with us, and please stay safe. And to my audience, you stay safe as well. And as I like to say at the end of our discussions, peace out.